Late afternoon in a sunlit park, a toddler stumbles and bursts into tears, clinging desperately to their mother's leg. In many cultures, the instinct is to encourage quick resilience. Brush it off. Stand up on your own. But the Japanese mother does something radically different. She kneels into the dust. She doesn't rush the tears away. Instead, she wraps the child in a complete, yielding embrace, allowing absolute surrender. Why would a society renowned for producing the world's most disciplined, self-reliant adults encourage such profound dependency in the early years? Have we, in our modern rush, fundamentally misunderstood the natural rhythm of growing up? We often push our children toward early independence, terrified that indulging their cries will create fragile adults. But what if this desperate race for self-reliance is actually seeding the very anxiety and deep-rooted insecurity we are trying to prevent? What if the secret to unshakable independence doesn't begin with forcing a child to stand alone, but by giving them the profound permission to be completely weak? This is where the true misunderstanding begins, and it will change everything you thought you knew about raising resilient humans. In modern Western parenting, there is a pervasive anxiety. We are often told that if we do not teach infants to self-soothe, sleep independently, and manage their emotions early, we will inevitably create excessively needy adults. The standard approach assumes that independence must be rigorously practiced from day one to be properly learned. But here is the paradox. Japanese culture, which produces some of the most highly disciplined, emotionally regulated, and self-reliant citizens globally, actively encourages prolonged physical and emotional dependence during early childhood. This contradiction is backed by profound developmental science. Cross-cultural studies examining attachment theory reveal a fascinating reality. Despite practices like continuous co-sleeping and immediate emotional rescue, Japanese children demonstrate remarkably superior emotional self-regulation by the time they reach school age compared to their independently trained peers. But this is where the misunderstanding begins. We assume that yielding to a child's desperate clinging creates a spoiled tyrant. Yet what looks like overindulgence on the surface is actually doing something much deeper to the developing nervous system. It is not about spoiling a child. It is a meticulously calculated system of emotional investment. To understand how this counterintuitive approach builds such unshakable independence, we must uncover the first pillar of this philosophy, an untranslatable concept that changes everything. To understand how this counterintuitive approach builds such unshakable independence, we must first look at a concept that fundamentally rewrites the rules of child psychology. It is called Amae, pronounced Amae. Directly translated, it means the desire to be loved, to be coddled, or the bittersweet privilege of dropping one's strong facade to rely completely on a safe figure. But here is what most parents do not realize. Amae is not a sign of a child failing to mature. It is a biological and psychological necessity. In the West, independence is often viewed as a muscle that must be constantly exercised. The assumption is that if you do not push a child to walk alone, they will forever demand to be carried. But Japanese developmental psychology views independence not as a muscle, but as a cup. When a child is allowed to have their deepest desire for dependence completely fulfilled, their emotional cup fills to the brim. And it is only when this cup overflows that it organically transforms into the genuine courage to step away. When a toddler melts down in a park, their central nervous system is in a state of high alarm. Forcing them to self-soothe in that exact moment often heightens their internal panic, even if they eventually comply in silence. By kneeling down and allowing complete surrender, a temporary emotional regression, the Japanese parent actively cools the child's nervous system. This is where people usually get it wrong. They assume that if you pick up a crying child, you are rewarding bad behavior. But science tells a different story. You are not rewarding the tantrum, you are answering a primal plea for safety. Instead of pushing children out into the world before they are ready, the Japanese approach pulls them closer, holding them tight until they naturally decide they want to leave. How many times have we unconsciously pushed away a small reaching hand simply because we were terrified they might never learn to stand on their own? The practical application for your own home is simple. Do not fear the weight of your child when they ask to be held. Allow their temporary weakness to exist without rushing to fix it. However, if you think Amae is only about emotional leniency, you are missing the physical foundation that makes it possible. Because this deep sense of reliance is not just a mental state, it is physically wired into the child through a powerful, unspoken language. If Amae is the emotional permission to depend on someone, how is that permission actually communicated to a child who cannot yet speak? The answer lies in a practice that completely upends standard Western advice on physical boundaries. It is known as skinship, pronounced Skinship. At its core, skinship is the profound communication of safety through continuous physical closeness, the sharing of body warmth, the rhythm of a heartbeat, and the gentle touch of skin against skin. In many Western households, there is an underlying urgency to physically separate from the infant early on. Parents are often advised to transition babies to their own rooms, to rely heavily on strollers, and to utilize cry-it-out methods to encourage independent sleeping. The prevailing fear is that too much physical contact will forge an unhealthy attachment. In Japan, however, physical closeness is not viewed as a hindrance to growth. It is cultivated as an invisible, protective shield. Caregivers frequently use baby carriers not merely for transport, but for continuous emotional attunement. Families often engage in co-sleeping for years, viewing the shared space as a vital foundation of trust. But this is the exact point where a massive cultural misunderstanding occurs. While this level of contact might seem like a recipe for an overly dependent child, developmental biology reveals an entirely different truth. This constant physical connection is not creating weakness. It is actively constructing a biological buffer against lifelong anxiety. Continuous, loving touch triggers a steady release of oxytocin, the love hormone, while simultaneously plummeting cortisol, the primary stress hormone. Instead of forcing a child to manage their distress alone after it has already peaked, the Japanese approach relies on anticipation before escalation. The caregiver's calm, regulated heartbeat literally acts as an external pacemaker for the child's developing nervous system, quieting the storm before it even has a chance to gather strength. For those raised with the mantra of strict self-reliance, this can feel deeply counterintuitive. Yet the practical application in your own life does not require a complete overhaul of your routines. It simply asks you to reevaluate the profound power of quiet, physical presence. Sometimes a silent, steady hand on a trembling shoulder has more power to instill true courage than 1,000 words of verbal encouragement. Think back on your own lifetime of experiences. Do you remember the last time a fierce, unconditional embrace completely melted away the heavy storms in your own heart? We never truly outgrow our need for that safe harbor. But what happens when the child actually needs to face the harsh realities of the world? Once the emotional cup of Amae is overflowing and the profound safety of skinship is rooted deeply within their subconscious, the most fascinating and misunderstood phase of Japanese parenting finally begins to bloom. If a child's emotional cup is filled through Amae and their nervous system is anchored by the absolute safety of skinship, the question naturally arises: do they ever actually learn to stand on their own 2 feet? This brings us to the final pillar, the mechanism that transforms all that early dependency into fierce self-reliance. It is a practice called Mimamoru, pronounced Mimamoru. Translated, it means to watch over or to protect with one's eyes. In Western parenting, there is often a pendulum swing between 2 extremes. We either helicopter and instantly rescue our children from any frustration, or we force them into strict isolation to figure it out and toughen up. But here is the brilliant shift in Japanese child psychology. Mimamoru is the intentional practice of stepping back and allowing a child to experience a productive struggle, but strictly through the lens of absolute safety. Because the child has been completely saturated with love and physical closeness in their earliest days, their brain has formed a profound, secure attachment. Developmental science proves that a child will only venture out to take risks when they are absolutely certain of their safe harbor. They do not need to constantly look back in a panic. Their nervous system already knows you are there. Therefore, when a Japanese parent sees their toddler frustrated by a complex toy or difficult playground step, they do not rush in to save the day. They step back, holding the child in a warm, attentive gaze. They let the frustration happen. This is the part most adults never stop to think about. True independence is not the desperate, lonely act of surviving by yourself. It is the quiet confidence of knowing you belong somewhere, which gives you the immense courage to explore everywhere else. To apply this tomorrow, try a simple shift. When your child faces a minor obstacle, take one deliberate physical step back. Bite your tongue. Let them wrestle with the frustration, but keep your eyes locked on them so they feel your unshakable presence. After all, do we not, even as adults, only dare to take massive leaps of faith when we know there is a solid home waiting to catch us if we fall? This loop of deep roots and wide wings is the ultimate secret kept across generations. And when you look at the entire picture, it completely reframes what we thought we knew about raising strong humans. When we look closely at the Japanese philosophy of raising children, the entire narrative around independence is completely inverted. We are often taught that resilience is forged by pushing a child into the cold wind to stand alone as quickly as possible. But the principles of Amae, Skinship, and Mimamoru reveal a much deeper biological truth. True independence is not the absence of need. It is the ultimate result of having your deepest needs completely fulfilled. By allowing the sweet surrender of Amae, offering the absolute physical safety of Skinship, and practicing the watchful, loving distance of Mimamoru, you are not spoiling a child. You are giving them the deep roots required to grow the strongest wings. They step boldly into the world because they know exactly where their safe harbor lies. Have you ever experienced a moment where yielding to your child's need for comfort actually made them more confident? Share your story in the comments below and make sure to subscribe so we can continue unraveling the quiet wisdom of raising resilient hearts together. Before you go, we'd love to hear your thoughts. As we continue to learn, reflect, and grow alongside the children in our lives, your shared wisdom is invaluable. Please leave a comment, like, and share this video with others who cherish these quiet, cross-cultural insights. Please remember that the perspectives and developmental psychology concepts explored here are for educational purposes only. Every family's journey is deeply personal. This content should not replace professional medical, psychological, or educational advice. Always consult a qualified specialist for specific concerns regarding the little ones you care for.